Viewer note: this is an original fictional dramatization created for entertainment. All characters, companies, financial institutions, transactions, and events are invented. Any resemblance to real people or organizations is coincidental. Story: millionaire husband gave his mistress his pregnant wife's black card. She froze it before the gala. Before we begin, stay with this story to the final scene, because the black card that gets declined tonight is only the first boundary Audrey Whitmore will enforce. If you enjoy emotional stories about marriage, dignity, family, and consequences, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. Now listen closely, because Grant Whitmore thinks the most dangerous thing his pregnant wife can do is embarrass him at a gala. He is about to learn how wrong that is. The funny thing about power is that most people don't know they've lost it until something refuses to obey. Declined. The word flashed crimson across the payment terminal. For one strange second, Sloane Mercer simply stared at it. Around her, the Hawthorne Children's Foundation Gala glittered beneath three-story crystal chandeliers, all champagne light and polished marble, the kind of Manhattan ballroom where a single table cost more than most families earned in a year. A string quartet played somewhere behind the champagne towers. Cameras clicked. Diamonds caught the light. Sloane smiled tightly. Again, the attendant swallowed and slid the black card through. Beep. Declined. This time, two women standing nearby stopped talking. Sloane's manicured fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. 31, beautiful in a sharp, expensive way. She wore a silver couture gown Grant Whitmore had personally approved that afternoon. Around her wrist glittered a diamond bracelet Sloane had selected earlier that afternoon. The boutique had taken Audrey Whitmore's black card to finalize the purchase at gala check-in. Now the charge would not clear. Run it again, Sloane whispered. The attendant hesitated. Beep. Declined. 3 refusals. 3 tiny sounds. And suddenly they seemed louder than the orchestra. Grant Whitmore appeared through the crowd almost immediately, tall and immaculate in a midnight tuxedo, his dark brown hair swept back, his square jaw already tightening with irritation. What's happening? Your card isn't working, Sloane said. Grant glanced at the terminal, then laughed. Not nervously, confidently. That card has no limit. The attendant looked uncomfortable. Sir, the terminal only says the issuer declined the transaction. Grant's smile disappeared. His eyes dropped to the embossed name on the card. Audrey E. Whitmore. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Silence. Not complete silence. Glasses still touched. Violins still breathed beneath conversation. But around Grant, a small circle of attention had begun to form. And then the ballroom doors opened. Audrey Whitmore stepped inside. 7 months pregnant. Champagne blonde hair fell in soft waves over the shoulders of an ivory maternity gown. Her pale blue-gray eyes moved across the room until they found her husband standing beside his mistress. One hand rested beneath the curve of her belly. The other held a small cream clutch. She looked beautiful. Not the loud beauty Sloane wore like armor. Something quieter. Something Grant had mistaken for weakness. His expression changed the instant he saw her. Audrey. Sloane turned. For the first time that evening, uncertainty touched her face. Audrey's gaze dropped briefly to the black card still trapped between Sloane's fingers. Her name was printed across it. Audrey E. Whitmore. 20 feet separated the two women. It felt like 20 inches. Grant moved first. He crossed the marble floor quickly, stopping in front of his pregnant wife with the controlled smile he used whenever investors were watching. Did you freeze the card? Audrey looked past him. At Sloane. At the bracelet. At the card. Then back at the man she had married 6 years earlier. Yes. Grant's nostrils flared. Turn it back on. The baby moved beneath Audrey's palm. A small kick. A reminder. She had spent months swallowing questions. Excusing late meetings. Ignoring unfamiliar perfume. Pretending not to notice how her husband's phone suddenly lived face down. But 36 hours earlier, Grant had finally made one mistake too arrogant to hide. He had taken something that belonged to Audrey, handed it to his mistress, and expected his wife to keep paying. Audrey tilted her head. No, Grant stared at her. Across the ballroom, someone slowly raised a phone. Stay with me, because Grant Whitmore thought his wife had frozen a credit card. He had no idea she had already made another call. And before this gala ended, the word declined would mean something far more expensive than a piece of plastic. 36 hours earlier, Audrey Whitmore had still been trying to convince herself that a missing credit card could have an innocent explanation. She stood barefoot inside the dressing room of their Fifth Avenue penthouse, one hand supporting her 7-month belly while the other searched the small velvet-lined safe for the third time. Passport, trust documents, her grandmother's sapphire earrings. But no black card. Audrey closed her eyes. The Hawthorne Obsidian card was not a household credit card. It had never belonged to Grant. Audrey was the sole cardholder, and the account was paid through private banking from separate family assets she had held before the marriage. Behind her, the bedroom door opened. Grant walked in while loosening his tie. "You're home early," Audrey said. Meeting ended. She watched him through the mirror. "Grant, have you seen my black card?" He didn't even stop. "I gave it to Sloane." Audrey turned slowly. For a moment, she genuinely thought she had misunderstood him. "You did what?" Grant removed his cuff links and placed them on the dresser with 2 soft clicks. "Sloane needed it for Gala expenses." "My card." "Jesus, Audrey." He sighed. "Don't start." There it was. Not guilt. Annoyance. As though the problem wasn't that he had taken his pregnant wife's private credit card and handed it to another woman. The problem was that Audrey had noticed. "That card is in my name and paid from my separate account. And we're married." Grant finally looked at her. "What's yours is mine." The words landed softly. That somehow made them worse. Audrey felt the baby shift beneath her ribs. "Did you ask me?" Grant laughed once. "No, Audrey. I didn't think I needed written permission from my wife to pay for my own gala." "Then use your card." His face hardened. For 3 seconds, neither spoke. Then Grant picked up his phone. "Sloane has vendors to handle. Dresses, jewelry, last-minute hospitality expenses. I don't have time for this." "Dresses, jewelry." Audrey stared at him. "This is a charity gala." Grant was already walking away. "Try not to make everything dramatic because you're pregnant." The door clicked shut. Audrey remained perfectly still. Cold piano music drifted from the living room speakers. Somewhere below, Manhattan traffic murmured against rain-slicked streets. Then her phone vibrated. Instagram. A new story from Sloane Mercer. Audrey almost ignored it. Almost. She tapped. Sloane was sitting inside Maison Bellamy, one of Manhattan's most exclusive jewelry boutiques, champagne beside her hand and velvet boxes spread across the glass counter. And there, beside the champagne flute, lay Audrey's black card. Sloane had positioned it carefully enough for the photograph to catch the name. Audrey E. Whitmore. Across the image were 4 words. Perks of being trusted. Audrey stopped breathing. Not because of the money. Grant had misunderstood that for years. It was the humiliation, the deliberate little photograph, the certainty that Audrey would see it and do nothing. Her eyes moved to another velvet box in the picture. A diamond bracelet. $86,000. Audrey sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. 6 years of marriage passed through her mind in fragments. Grant kissing her forehead before investor meetings. Grant calling her his good luck charm. Grant promising their daughter would grow up knowing what respect looked like. Audrey placed a hand over her belly. Then she opened her contacts. She did not call Grant. She did not call Sloane. She called the private banking number printed on the back of every Hawthorne account. "Mrs. Whitmore," a familiar voice answered. "How can I assist you?" Audrey looked at Sloane's photograph one final time. Freeze card ending 1908. A keyboard clicked. Immediately. Another pause. "Would you like us to freeze only the card, Mrs. Whitmore?" Audrey's eyes lifted toward Grant's closed office door. Something inside her became very still. For now, she ended the call. And for the first time in months, Audrey smiled. Grant thought his wife had finally become obedient. He didn't know she had simply stopped warning him. Grant Whitmore liked telling people he had built everything from nothing. Audrey had heard the story hundreds of times. At investor dinners. On magazine profiles. Beneath chandeliers where men with 8-figure portfolios leaned forward while Grant described sleeping 4 hours a night, risking everything, refusing to fail. There was only one detail he always left out. Her. 6 years earlier, Whitmore Hospitality had not been an empire. It had been 3 struggling boutique hotels, $14 million in debt, and a 36-year-old founder whose bank had given him 90 days to refinance. That was when Grant met Audrey Hawthorne. She was 23, champagne blonde, quietly beautiful, and sitting alone at a charity auction when Grant spilled bourbon near her dress. He apologized. She laughed. He fell in love with the laugh. Or perhaps with how little she told him. Audrey dressed quietly and rarely discussed her family. When Grant asked, she said only, "They're in investments." Hawthorne Capital had been built by her late grandfather. Grant was different. At least she believed he was. "I don't care what your family has," he told her once, holding her face between his hands. "I'm going to build something that belongs to us." Audrey believed him. So when Whitmore Hospitality's refinancing collapsed 4 months before their wedding, she helped. Quietly. No dramatic check. No announcement. Hawthorne Capital guaranteed a new credit facility after Audrey personally asked the Family Investment Committee to review Grant's company. The financing saved all 3 hotels. Grant called it his breakthrough. 2 years later, when he needed capital for properties in Miami and Chicago, another Hawthorne-backed facility appeared. Grant called that good timing. When lenders hesitated during expansion, Audrey approved additional support through a separate investment vehicle administered for her family assets. Grant called that brilliant negotiation, and Audrey never corrected him. She wanted a husband, not a debtor. For years, that distinction seemed worth protecting. Then came the pregnancy. At first, Grant cried when Audrey showed him the positive test. He knelt in their bathroom, pressed his forehead against her stomach, and whispered, "Our little girl is going to have everything." Audrey remembered believing him. By month 4, dinners became meetings. By month 5, meetings became overnight trips. By month 6, his phone started sleeping face down. Then Sloane Mercer began appearing everywhere. Company dinners, weekend strategy sessions, photographs from conferences Grant had told Audrey were executive only. Sloane was always close enough to touch him. Audrey asked once. Grant kissed her forehead. "You're imagining things." She asked again weeks later. "You're hormonal." By the 3rd time, Audrey stopped asking. Not because she believed him, because she had started watching. Credit statements, hotel reservations, private flights. 1 suite in Boston booked under Grant's assistant's name. 2 guests, 1 bed. Audrey sat alone at the kitchen island that night, the city glowing beneath the windows, her unborn daughter moving inside her. She could have confronted him. Instead, she closed the laptop. Because something had finally become clear. Grant wasn't merely cheating. He had begun treating Audrey's silence as permission, her patience as stupidity, her wealth as his property. And somewhere along the way, the man who promised to build something with her had rewritten the story until he believed he had built everything alone. That was why the missing black card mattered. Not because it could buy an $86,000 bracelet. Because Grant had taken it without asking, handed it to his mistress, and smiled as though Audrey had never owned anything he couldn't give away. What Grant still didn't understand was simple. Audrey had spent 6 years protecting him from knowing exactly how much of his empire rested on her signature. Soon, she would stop. By 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the gala, Grant Whitmore was still giving Audrey instructions as though nothing had happened. The ivory dress. Audrey looked up from the sofa. Grant stood near the bedroom mirror fastening a platinum watch around his wrist, already dressed in black trousers and a crisp white shirt. He had not mentioned the frozen card. Not once. "The blue one photographs better," Audrey said. I said ivory. His eyes met hers through the mirror. "Nothing too flashy. Tonight isn't about you." There it was again. That quiet assumption that Audrey existed to complete the picture. Pregnant wife. Perfect marriage. Perfect CEO. She lowered her eyes to her belly. "Of course." Grant smiled. He mistook surrender for obedience. Again, his phone vibrated. Sloane Mercer appeared across the screen. Grant turned it face down. "The car comes at 7. Don't be late." The bedroom door closed behind him. Audrey waited until his footsteps disappeared. Then the penthouse became silent. At 4:17, the elevator chimed. Eleanor Price entered carrying a black leather briefcase. She was 52, silver-haired, precise, and had represented the Hawthorne family long enough to remember Audrey losing her first tooth. Today she did not hug her. That told Audrey everything. "Show me." Eleanor placed 3 folders across the dining table. 1, 2, 3. The first contained the obsidian card statements. The second contained documents tracing Audrey's separate family assets. The third was thicker. Whitmore Hospitality. Audrey stared at it. "What did you find?" Eleanor opened the folder. Grant's acquisition. For months, Grant had spoken publicly about purchasing Belgrave Resorts, a luxury chain valued in the tens of millions. He called it the deal that would make Whitmore Hospitality untouchable. What about it? He can't close under the financing package he plans to announce tonight without the Hawthorne sidecar commitment. Audrey's fingers stopped moving. Eleanor slid a document toward her. Your family approved due diligence months ago, but the transaction-specific support letter still requires final authorization. It has not been executed. Audrey studied the blank signature line. Grant had spoken about the Hawthorne piece as if it were already his. Keep reading. Audrey turned the page. A proposed management structure appeared. Grant Whitmore, chairman. Then another name. Sloane Mercer, executive vice president, brand strategy. Audrey's stomach tightened. He's giving her part of Belgrave? Operational control and performance-based equity. The room seemed suddenly colder. Grant had not simply given his mistress Audrey's card. He intended to use financing supported by Audrey's family to build Sloane a future. Audrey pushed herself slowly from the chair and walked toward the windows. Far below, Manhattan moved beneath a gray winter sky. Her daughter kicked. Once. Hard. What happens if I refuse the final support? Eleanor did not soften the answer. The lender reassesses the closing package immediately. Grant can seek replacement capital, but Belgrave will not close tonight under the structure he has been advertising. Audrey closed her eyes. And Whitmore Hospitality. It survives. Audrey turned. So I'm not destroying his company. No, Eleanor's expression remained still. You would simply refuse to guarantee his next gamble. That mattered. Audrey did not want revenge disguised as justice. She wanted her name removed from the lie. Eleanor gathered the papers. There's something else. Audrey looked at her. The Belgrave announcement is scheduled for 9:15 tonight. Of course it was. Grant planned to stand beneath chandeliers, beside his pregnant wife, and announce an empire financed by the woman he was humiliating. Audrey looked toward the ivory gown hanging across the room. Then at the black card statement. Then at her signature. What do you need from me? Eleanor placed the final authorization page on the table. If you want Hawthorne money in this transaction, this is where you consent. Audrey did not pick up the pen. She slid the page back across the marble. For 6 years, her signature had opened doors for Grant Whitmore. At 4:31 that afternoon, she chose not to open this one. And Grant was still upstairs choosing which tie would look best when he announced the deal. Daniel Hawthorne did not raise his voice. Men like Grant expected anger. Anger could be dismissed, explained away, blamed on champagne, family loyalty, misunderstanding. Calm was harder. Daniel, Grant said, forcing a smile. You're taking this out of context. Am I? Daniel stopped beside Audrey. The ballroom seemed to shrink around them. Sloane quietly lowered the black card. Grant noticed. Put that away, he snapped. Too late. Daniel had already seen it. He looked at Sloane's diamond bracelet, then at Audrey's name printed across the card. That belongs to my niece. It was for gala expenses, Grant said. Audrey almost smiled. The lie sounded smaller every time someone repeated it. Daniel turned toward Grant. Did you just tell Audrey that everything she has exists because she married you? Grant glanced at the phone surrounding them. This is a private marital disagreement. No, Audrey said softly. It stopped being private when you gave my property to your mistress. A ripple moved through the crowd. Sloane's face hardened. I am not, don't. Grant's command cut through her sentence. For the first time, Sloane looked at him not like a lover, but like a liability. Then Audrey's phone vibrated. One notification. She looked down. Belgrave's support commitment. Final authorization withheld. No fireworks. Just a quiet confirmation on her screen. Yet Audrey felt 6 years of invisible weight leave her shoulders. Grant saw the message. His face changed. What did you do? Audrey locked the phone. I declined the final Hawthorne support required for Belgrave. Grant stared at her, then laughed. But this laugh was different. Thin. Breathless. You can't do that. I just did. The financing package is ready. Conditional, Daniel corrected. Grant turned toward him. Daniel's expression remained almost bored. Conditional on the final Hawthorne support letter. Sloane frowned. What does that mean? Nobody answered her. Grant understood. That was enough. His eyes returned to Audrey. You promised to support the company. I supported it. You approved preliminary diligence. And I never signed the final support letter. Your attorneys made a closing condition. Grant's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Audrey remembered the first hotel. The emergency refinancing. The Miami expansion. Chicago. Every moment Grant had returned home celebrating another brilliant victory while she quietly signed the documents, keeping lenders comfortable. Daniel looked toward the guests. Since we're discussing who built what, perhaps context would be useful. Daniel, Grant warned. Daniel ignored him. Whitmore Hospitality's first major refinancing was approved after Hawthorne Capital provided institutional backing. Whispers spread. The Miami and Chicago expansions received similar support. Grant's skin went pale. Audrey watched him realize what was happening. His mythology was collapsing. Not his company. His mythology. The self-made millionaire. The fearless negotiator. The man who needed nobody. Grant stepped toward Audrey. You're doing this because of a credit card? No. Her answer came immediately. I froze the card because it was mine. She paused. I declined the final Belgrave support because that decision was mine too. Sloane looked from Grant to Audrey. Confusion became calculation. How much of the company does her family own? Grant snapped toward her. That's irrelevant. Interesting. 30 minutes earlier, Sloane had been wearing Audrey's money like a trophy. Now she wanted to know whether Grant had any money of his own. Audrey saw it. So did Daniel. Grant checked his watch. 9:07. 8 minutes until the Belgrave announcement. His phone vibrated. Then again. Then again. CFO. General Counsel. Belgrave Acquisition Team. Grant ignored all three. Reverse it, he whispered. Audrey looked at him. For 6 years, she had opened doors and allowed Grant to believe he possessed the keys. Tonight, she had simply removed her hand. I'm not taking anything from you, Grant. His phone began ringing. Audrey stepped closer. I'm letting you discover what was actually yours. Across the ballroom, the giant presentation screen flickered to life. Whitmore Hospitality plus Belgrave Resorts. Grant stared at it. Then his CFO came running through the crowd. And judging by the terror on the man's face, the second decline of the evening had just arrived. Grant, we have a problem. The CFO's voice cut through the ballroom. Grant Whitmore did not move. For 3 full seconds, he simply stared at the man approaching him, as though refusing to acknowledge bad news might somehow prevent it from becoming real. What problem? Michael Reeves stopped beside him, breathless, phone clutched in one hand. The bank paused the Belgrave, closing funds. Sloane's lips parted. Grant's face remained perfectly still. Suspended. Pending credit review. No one word. Sharp. Certain. The word of a man accustomed to reality changing when he objected strongly enough. Michael lowered his voice. They received notice that the final Hawthorne support letter will not be executed. Grant looked at Audrey. Behind them, the presentation screen still glowed. Whitmore Hospitality plus Belgrave Resorts, 9:11 p.m. For minutes before Grant was supposed to walk onto that stage and announce the largest acquisition of his career. Call them, Grant said. I did. Call again. Grant, call them again. The orchestra faltered. Heads turned. More phones rose. Audrey remained beside Daniel, one hand resting protectively beneath her belly. She had seen Grant angry before, but never frightened. Fear looked strange on him. It loosened his perfect posture, made his eyes move too quickly, made his expensive tuxedo suddenly look like a costume. Sloane grabbed his arm. Fix this. Grant looked at her. What? The acquisition. Her voice dropped. You told me everything was finalized. It is finalized. Michael shook his head. It isn't. That sentence landed harder than the declined card. The first refusal had embarrassed Grant. This one threatened the story he had built his entire identity around. His phone rang. Belgrave's chairman. Grant answered immediately. Thomas, listen. Audrey couldn't hear the other side. She didn't need to. Grant's expression told the story. No, the financing is secure. Pause. This is temporary. Another pause. Thomas. The line went dead. Grant slowly lowered the phone. At 9:13, the giant presentation screen behind him went black. Someone from the event staff had received instructions. The Belgrave announcement was canceled. A murmur rolled through the ballroom. Grant turned toward Audrey. For the first time that night, he did not sound like her husband. He sounded like a man standing outside a locked door. Audrey. She waited. We can fix this. Interesting word. We. Grant had spent years saying I when things succeeded. Now that everything was collapsing, suddenly there was a we again. Sign the support letter, he said. No, his eyes flashed. Do you understand what this could cost? Yes. Hundreds of employees depend on me. The company is not losing its operating facilities. Grant froze. Audrey continued calmly. I decline new support for the Belgrave acquisition. Not payroll. Not existing properties. Not your employees. Daniel's mouth almost curved into a smile. Grant had tried to turn his consequences into Audrey's guilt. She had anticipated it. You planned this. No, Audrey said. You planned this. I read the paperwork. Sloane stepped closer. Grant, you said Hawthorne Capital was just an investor. He didn't answer. You said you didn't need them anymore. Sloane, not now. Her expression shifted. The glamorous confidence disappeared. What else did you lie about? Grant turned away from her. Then something happened Audrey never expected. He reached for her hand. Audrey, please. She looked down. 6 years earlier, that hand had held hers at their wedding. Tonight it had handed her black card to another woman. We can talk at home, Grant whispered. Just reverse this tonight. Audrey gently removed her fingers from his. You already told me what our home means to you. His face collapsed for half a second. Then every phone around them vibrated almost simultaneously. Board members looked down. Michael went pale. Grant. What now? Emergency board meeting. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. Grant stared at the message. Sloane slowly stepped away from him. One step. Then another. The distance was small. Audrey noticed anyway. Because when the black card had declined, Sloane had moved closer to Grant. When his empire declined, she moved away. And the night still wasn't finished with either of them. You told me the money was yours. Sloane's voice was barely above a whisper. But Grant heard it. So did Audrey. The ballroom had changed. 20 minutes earlier, Sloane Mercer had entered it wearing diamonds and certainty. Now she stood 3 feet from Grant, staring at him as if she were meeting him for the first time. Grant rubbed a hand across his jaw. Not here. You told me Hawthorne Capital didn't matter anymore. Sloane. You said Audrey was just sitting on family money. Grant's eyes darted toward the guests. Stop talking. Wrong answer. Sloane's face hardened. She pulled the diamond bracelet from her wrist. What about the apartment? Grant froze. Audrey noticed. So did Eleanor Price, who had quietly joined Daniel near the edge of the crowd. What apartment? Audrey asked. Grant turned toward her. Nothing. Sloane laughed. It wasn't glamorous now. It sounded frightened. The Tribeca apartment you said was closing next week. Grant stepped toward her. Enough. But Sloane was already unraveling. You said it was my place. You said after the Belgrave announcement we wouldn't have to hide anymore. Audrey felt something inside her go cold. Not heartbreak. That part was over. Recognition. She opened her cream clutch. Grant saw the folded papers inside. His expression changed. Audrey. She removed a review packet covering 3 months of transactions from accounts in her name. Luxury hotels, private flights, designer boutiques, jewelry, and a reservation deposit tied to a Tribeca condominium. Eleanor had traced only entries Audrey was entitled to review. Whether any charge had been authorized or properly classified would be for the bank and company professionals to determine. The card was never the whole story. It was simply the loose thread. Audrey held the packet toward Grant. Were you planning to build this second life using accounts and financial support tied to me? Grant didn't answer. Sloane looked at him. You said that money came from your personal account. It was being handled. Handled? Her voice cracked. You gave me her card. Phones lifted again. Grant's composure finally broke. You were happy to spend it. The words exploded across the marble ballroom. Sloane recoiled. There it was. Not love. Not partnership. 2 people suddenly realizing they had trusted the same liar. Grant pointed at her. Don't stand there pretending you didn't know exactly what you were doing. I knew you were married, Sloane snapped. I didn't know you were financing everything through her. A collective murmur moved through the guests. Audrey said nothing. She didn't need to. Grant and Sloane were doing the work for her. That was the strange thing about lies. Once frightened, they began attacking each other. Sloane looked down at the bracelet in her hand. For a moment, she seemed almost ashamed. Then she crossed to the jewelry counter and placed it carefully on the velvet display. No one asked her to. No one applauded. The tiny click of diamonds touching glass was enough. Grant turned to Audrey. You're enjoying this. Audrey looked at him. No, and she meant it. Revenge would have required pleasure. This felt more like surgery. Painful. Necessary. Final. She handed the packet to Eleanor. Send only what is relevant. Grant stepped forward. To whom? Eleanor took out her phone. The bank's dispute team, Whitmore Hospitality's general counsel, and the board's audit committee. Unrelated personal information stays redacted. Grant went white. You can't distribute private financial records. Audrey can provide records from her own accounts for review, Eleanor said. A soft electronic chime sounded. Sent. Grant stared at the phone as though it were a detonator. In a way, it was. Sloane picked up her clutch. Where are you going? Grant demanded. She looked at him for several seconds. Then at Audrey. Then at the black card still lying beside the payment terminal. I thought you were the millionaire. Grant's jaw tightened. Sloane walked away. Audrey watched her disappear beneath the chandeliers. Then she turned back to her husband. Grant had spent years believing money made him powerful. Tonight, the money had stopped answering. And without it, everyone could finally hear the man underneath. For months later, Audrey Hawthorne stood at the window of a smaller apartment overlooking the East River with her newborn daughter asleep against her shoulder. Clara was 6 weeks old, warm and impossibly light, one hand tucked beneath her chin. The quiet still surprised Audrey. For years, she had mistaken constant access for closeness. Grant's messages, Grant's requests, Grant's emergencies, Grant's certainty that her time and resources would always be available. Now the phone on the table could ring without controlling the room. The review at Whitmore Hospitality had taken nearly 3 months. Audrey did not direct it. She provided statements from accounts in her name, answered questions through counsel, and refused to speculate about records she had never seen. Independent directors and company counsel handled the rest. They found enough undisclosed personal spending, conflicts surrounding Sloane's proposed Belgrave role, and inaccurate representations about the transaction's financing to force a leadership change. Grant resigned as chief executive rather than fight a board that no longer trusted him. He remained a shareholder. Whitmore Hospitality remained open. Belgrave found another buyer months later. The employees Grant had invoked at the gala kept their jobs. That mattered to Audrey more than the headlines ever could. Sloane returned the bracelet through the jeweler the next morning. Audrey never contacted her. She had no desire to turn another woman into a symbol. Sloane had made choices Audrey could not respect, but Grant had made his own. Accountability did not require Audrey to spend the rest of her life hating either of them. Grant's first apologies were still about loss. The deal, the board, the image. Then, slowly, his language changed. After Clara was born, he wrote a letter that did not ask Audrey to come back. He admitted that taking her card had been more than arrogance. It had revealed how completely he had begun treating her consent as optional. Audrey read the whole letter. She did not mistake insight for repair. But she kept it in Clara's file because one day her daughter might want proof that people could understand a wrong even when understanding came too late to undo it. The divorce moved forward through attorneys. Audrey asked for a fair division under New York law and for her separate family assets to remain separate. Grant did the same with property that was legally his. They agreed that Clara deserved parents who could exchange information without using the child as leverage. Their first co-parenting meeting lasted 42 minutes. It was awkward, civil, and more honest than many dinners during the last year of their marriage. Audrey also changed something else. With the Hawthorne Family Foundation, she created the Clara Financial Independence Program, a modest grant and education fund for women rebuilding after economic control in a relationship. The program did not promise revenge, secret fortunes, or overnight rescue. It paid for consultations with qualified attorneys and financial counselors, temporary document replacement costs, and practical classes on accounts, credit, and budgeting. Audrey insisted on one sentence in its mission statement: a boundary is not punishment. On a clear April morning, she carried Clara into Hawthorne Private Bank to replace the card that had started everything. The manager placed a black metal card on the desk. Audrey E. Hawthorne. Would you like me to activate it now? He asked. Audrey looked at her daughter. Clara opened her blue-gray eyes and made the smallest sound. Yes, Audrey said after a moment. But set the travel alerts to my phone only. The manager smiled. Of course. It was such an ordinary request that Audrey almost laughed. Outside, Manhattan moved beneath spring sunlight. People hurried to meetings. Taxis leaned on their horns. Somewhere, another gala was probably being planned. Audrey stepped onto the sidewalk with Clara against her chest, and the new card zipped inside her bag. Grant had believed wealth meant never hearing no. Sloane had believed the card meant she had been chosen. Audrey had once believed love meant leaving every door open. She knew better now. Love without consent was entitlement. Generosity without boundaries eventually became surrender. And power, in the end, was not the ability to ruin someone who had hurt you. It was the ability to protect what mattered, walk away from what no longer did, and still choose not to become cruel. Audrey kissed the top of Clara's head and kept walking.